In this episode we are going to be talking about CSS in JS, and that is an approach of writing your CSS well inside of JS. Kind of a controversial subject in front-end community, but we are not going to go into all of that in this video. If you want to know more about it, just write CSS in JS into Google and you will find a lot of different opinions. Some people like it, some people hate it. Of course, since we are doing this video, you probably know I like it. I think it's a great approach, and we are using this approach in the company I work for, Human, and it's proving to be pretty nice. It has a lot of advantages. For example, all of your CSS is going to be scoped to the components that you're working on. You don't have to worry about cascade, you don't have to worry about naming. You can easily pass variables and props and whatever you are doing inside of your application to your CSS, so that makes your CSS pretty dynamic actually, if you want it to be, instead of static and so on. So I think it's a great approach. Some people will not agree with me on that. However, as I said, we are going to take this approach in this series. Of course, if you want to just use normal CSS and learn how to handle that CSS in your React or Next.js applications, just write it into Google. I'm sure there are a lot of tutorials about that. But in this series, we are going to take CSS in JS approach using Emotion library. So for this approach we are going to be using the library called Emotion. It's a pretty popular library. There are a few others, but we are going to be using this because this is what we are using in the company I work for, and I'm pretty familiar with it. So as you can see, you can install it to be agnostic, so you can use it with Vue or your JavaScript application or whatever, so it doesn't have to be React. But if you want to install it as especially for React, then you have to install it this way, so npm install Emotion core. And we are also going to install some additions to that because we are also going to be doing theming, style components and so on. So let's install Emotion first of all. And to do that, I'm going to do npm install, and then we are going to install Emotion core, and then Emotion styled, and Emotion theming. This is all we are going to be needing for this video. I'm going to press enter and wait for it to install. So once this is done, we can go to our code editor and start implementing it. So first of all, what I want to do is I just want to remove all of this code. I'm just going to leave container right here, and I'm going to remove all of this code from our index.js file because we don't need it. It comes out of the box with Next.js. So we are going to remove that, and this is one more way in which you can write CSS if you need to. So this is kind of a normal way of writing CSS inside of your React components. You can use that approach if you want, but we are going to first of all delete all of this and just leave those containers. And I'm going to write something like, this is our front page. Okay, save it. Let's check out our site. And now right here we just have, now I'm a real header from the last episode, and this is our front page. Great. So we have everything clear right here. So let's start implementing Emotion and kind of start styling this header, for example, because as I said, when using CSS in JS, the best approach is to actually scope your CSS to your React components, and then that CSS is just going to be available to that component and it's not going to spill out through the rest of your application. So that's what I meant when I said you don't need to worry about cascade. Nothing is going to overwrite your styles down the line if you are building a big application or a big website. Now in our app.js file we are going to import the theme provider from Emotion theming, and this is going to allow us to wrap all of our application inside a theme, and then inside a theme constant or variable, we can define our actual theme. And this is something similar if you ever worked with CSS or CSS to defining your variables, your mixins and so on, right? So you would define the colors for your application, you would define font weights, font sizes and so on for your application, that you can easily use it when you're styling your site. So this is what theming in Emotion means. So we are going to import first of all theme provider, and then we are going to define our theme very simply, as you will see. Right, so this is our theme provider. Now we want to wrap our application inside of a theme provider. And now we need to define our theme. You would usually define your theme in a separate file and then import it. But just to make things much clearer right here, I'm just going to define our theme here, and I'm just going to define one property of it. So let's define our theme with a constant, and we are going to, of course, call it theme. And now in it, we want to define, for example, colors. And let's define our primary color. It's going to be red, of course. And now we want to pass that theme to our theme provider. And now whenever we are styling our components, we will have access to this colors primary, right? To these colors. Of course, you can define font weights or whatever you like in here that you are going to be reusing throughout your application, so that you can stay pretty consistent with your styles. So to provide a theme to our theme provider, you just do theme, and that's about it. Okay, so let's just save this, and now we are going to try to style our header.js file that we created in previous episode. So now what we want to do in our header.js file, first of all, we want to import styled from Emotion styled so that we can style our components. And now right here below, I like to write it below our actual component because it kind of reminds me of Vue, right? So when you're working with Vue, you would have at the top your HTML, and then at the bottom you would have your CSS. So this is going to look kind of like a Vue component. It's an approach I like very much. So we are going to define a variable called header styled, and then we are going to say styled.header. Now this header right here is going to represent a tag inside your HTML, like we have right here, header. So we are going to remove that header from here because we don't need it, because this is going to provide us with that element. Now this can be div, for example, an a tag, a span, whatever the root of your component is going to be. So for us, it's going to be a header tag. So we are going to say header. And then you open your backticks and you can start writing your CSS right here. So now I'm just going to, for example, change the background of our header, right? And you write your CSS just like you would normally. And also you can use, as you will see a little bit later, you can use indentation like you would do in CSS and so on, right? So it's pretty powerful this way. Now, nothing is going to happen right here. If I save this, go to our website, as you can see, nothing happened, nothing is changed. Our header hasn't changed its background. Now, why is that? This is because we still didn't wrap it. We still didn't wrap our component inside of header styled. So if we do this right now, this should actually work. And remember, this header style is actually a header element right here. So if I save this, check it out in the browser, as you will see, we now have a gray color behind our header. And if we take a look at this element, let me make this a bit bigger. If I take a look at this element right now, as you can see, it has a class, it has a tag of header and some dynamic class that Next.js is currently giving to this header. Great. So let me show you what we did with the theming part that we did in the app.js when we define our primary colors. So I can go to our code editor, and now right here, instead of writing EF, if I want to use my primary color, I will just do something like this. So remember, all of this is JS. We are still inside of a JS. This is just template literal. in which you can write JS by doing just $sign and this, right? So I can access my primary color through props. So I can do props.colors.primary. Did we call it colors or color? Yes, colors. So props.colors.primary. If I save this now, check it out in the browser. Of course, it doesn't work because I didn't call it correctly. I forgot to put .theme. So right here, it should be props.theme.colors.primary. Save it now. Let's check it out in the browser and hope it works. And as you can see, this now works. Now you can of course go to your app.js and add whatever you like in here and then use those variables when you're styling something. Now before we go any further with styling our header, what I want to do is I want to define some global styles. Specifically some kind of resets or normalizes, because as you can see right here, this doesn't look very good. First of all, we are using Times New Roman. Second of all, as you can see, we have this kind of a margin around our header, which we of course don't want. And all of this is coming from browser's default styles. So we want to normalize those styles. And to do that, we want to define some global styles that you would usually do when building an app or when building a website. And you will usually use something like reset CSS or normalize CSS to just overwrite browser's default styles. Of course, you can do that with Emotion, and we are going to do that inside of a special component called global styles. In it, you would, as I said, usually add your reset CSS, but another common use case for global styles is, for example, calling your custom fonts, which you can also do that right there, and defining some globally used CSS classes, like for example that we're going to be adding in it a container class that is going to center our content inside of our page, as you will see in just a second. So now inside of a components folder, I'm going to create a new folder called global styles, and in it I'm going to create a new component called globalstyles.js. Right, so it's going to look kind of like this. So you have components, inside it you have global styles directory, and then you have globalstyles.js. Now in globalstyle.js is where we are going to define our global styles. So first of all, we want to import global and CSS from Emotion Core. After that, we are going to define our global styles component. We are going to define it like this because we are not going to have any logic in it. So we just want to display something. In this case, we are just going to add some CSS to it. So here I'm going to call a global component. In it, I'm going to define styles prop. And now inside my backticks right here, I can write whatever styles I want. So for example, let's say that we want all of our text on the website to be red. So we can just do something like body color is going to be red. If I save this right now, of course, nothing is going to happen because we still didn't import global inside our app.js. And to do that, we need to first of all export global styles. Save this. Now we go to our app.js file, and in it we are going to import those global styles that we just created. We just import them right here, and now you don't wrap it around your application. You can just put it above the header. So you would add global styles above the header like this. Save this, and let's just see if this works. So now, as you can see, our text on the page is red, and if we change it to be black, save this, now it's going to be black, right? Okay, so this works. Now, as I said, what we want to do here is we actually want to add some normalizing or resetting styles. And I'm just going to copy them. You will, of course, have access to them through the GitHub. The link will be in the description below. So we go into our globalstyles.js file, and in here I'm just going to paste all of those styles for normalizing our CSS. Okay, so as you can see, there's pretty a lot of it. This is, I think, normalized CSS that you can download from the internet, but you can use reset CSS if you like that better. So if I save this, now our page is going to look a little bit different. Right, as you can see, we are no longer using Times New Roman, we are using sans serif, we lost this margin around, and so on. So now our website is normalized. There is just one more thing that I want to add, and I want to add that container style that we are going to be using throughout this series, just so that we can center our content to the center of the page. So at the end here, I'm just going to paste this in. So it's just kind of a normal container style that we can use throughout this series, so that we don't have to worry about that. We save this, and that's about it. Now we have defined our global styles. Now let's style our header.js a little bit more. And yeah, before I forget, if you are using VS Code, definitely install this extension for it, VS Code Style Components, because that is going to syntax highlight your CSS that you're writing. That is why my CSS right here is highlighted like this. And also you can use Emmet right here. So if I do BG, it's just going to add a background. If I do P, it's going to add padding. So it has auto completion and everything. There is a very similar add-on or extension for PHP Storm, and I also think that there should probably be something for Sublime Text. So whatever code editor you are using, just look for the styled components plugin so that you can have your CSS look as nice as this. So let's just style our header a little bit. Before we go, I'm going to add that container class right here so that I center everything to the center of the page inside of a header. Of course, since we are using React, you're not going to write class equals container, but class name equals container. Now in here, I'm going to add a logo. I'm going to delete this. And in here, I'm going to add a div with the class of logo. And in it, I'm going to call an SVG, and I already have this SVG saved into public images. So if you go to public, right, public images, I have logo SVG. You can use whatever image you like. Okay, so we added that, and also I would just want to add some text. So we are going to call our site Next Movies. I'm going to add a span right here with the class name of logo text. And I'm going to call it Next Movies. Okay, now we have our HTML set up. Let's add some styling to this header. So first of all, I'm just going to add padding to it of 20 pixels. I'm going to display flex and align items to center for our logo. And then, as I said, just like in SCSS, you can indent your code. So I'm going to write logo text inside here. And in it, I'm just going to add some styling for that logo text. Okay, save this and check out our site. And as you can see, this is how our header looks right now. I don't want this to be using this red color, so I'm just going to change it to that gray variant. Save this, check it out. Also, this is all going to automatically refresh for you. You don't have to press refresh when doing something like this. Now this looks a little bit better. So now I just want to give you a taste of what makes CSS and JS so powerful. So for example, in our header, we can define a prop called isDark. Since this is going to be true right now, we don't have to write anything. So you wouldn't do something like this, right? You would just say isDark. And if it isn't dark, then you would delete it. So I would do isDark. This is going to be our prop. And let's say we have dark theme and light theme in our website. So I'm going to define that header isDark. Do this. Now I can go to header.js and do something with that prop inside of my CSS. And how do I do that? Well, very easily. We already got a taste of that at the beginning of this video. As I said, this is just a template literal, and we can do something like this. So we can say props, and then we will say props isDark. And if this component has a prop of isDark, then we can say something like this. So if it is dark, then it's going to have a background of black. And if it isn't, then it's going to have a background of that grayish color. And that's about it. Now if I save this, nothing is going to happen. If we go to our browser, it's still a light theme, quote unquote. And this is because we still didn't pass that prop to our CSS. And how do we pass it? Well, we pass it very easily. So we just go to our header styled right here. And then we say isDark equals isDark. And we have to pass it here also. So this is what you would normally do when passing any kind of prop. So we are destructuring our props object and getting isDark prop, and then we are sending it through header style into our CSS. And now we can do whatever we want with it inside of our CSS, right? So now CSS has access to this. If I save this and go to our website, this is black right now. If I go to our app.js and remove isDark, save it, now this should be light colored, right? So this is just taste of what you can do with CSS and JS. And there is just one more little thing that I want to show you, and that is these polished.js helpers, right? So since we are using CSS and JS, we don't have access to some functions that you would have from your normal front-end libraries like Bootstrap or Foundation. So you have to use your own functions that you get from your CSS. One of those can be something like rem. So you wanna transform your pixels into rems. You can of course write your own functions if you want, but I think that using this polish.js is actually much better because this is of course open sourced, much more people are working on it, and you have much more functions that you can use. And you can use just the functions that you need. So let's first of all just install polished. So npm install polished. Press enter, wait for it to install. Now we just go to our code editor, and in header.js we can just call the functions from polished library that we need. For example, we need rem. A rem is going to transform our pixels values into rems. To do that, you would just import rem from polished, like this. And now in your CSS, what you can do, you just go down here and you have this font size is 20 pixels. So we are going to use rem here. We don't want font size to be in pixels. You would just do something like this. So you open up your curly braces, say rem, and pass in the value that you want. So this is going to turn 20 pixels into rems. If we save this, go to our website, as you can see, everything is pretty much the same, but if we take a look at this text right here, you can see that it's not 20 pixels, but it's 1.25 rems, right? And you have many of those helpers on this site, so you can use whatever you like, right? You just go through this, as it says in the usage, define what you need for that specific component, and just use that. Okay, so I hope you like this intro into CSS and JS. As I said, we are going to be using this throughout this whole series to style our components. And it's a very valuable knowledge if you plan to work with Next.js and React throughout your career. So anyway, remember, everything we did here will be available for you on GitHub. The link will be in the description below. And as always, thank you guys for watching, and I will see you in the next one.